Hi, my name is Winnie. Welcome to my life's journey. Thank you so much for liking and subscribing. I appreciate your support. I appreciate your, subscribing to this channel. And of course, today I want to talk about a story that is very personal to me, of my own mother. Of course, this last week I've been thinking about the, Nigerian singer and what has happened to her, and it's been one of the saddest stories I've, had in a long time. And of course, this has, made me also come out to just talk about the story of my own mother, who was the fifth born in a family of 8. Of course, she left home, coming to Nairobi and saying that she wanted to make, a better life for herself, and of course her family. And what happened was that when she got into a relationship and she got married, but later she realized that the man she was married to was actually abusive. And she went through that moment, in the marriage, trying to fix it, trying to think he will change, trying to think situations will change, just staying in and trying to maneuver through the moments. After all, a lot of people looked up to her, and she wanted to prove that she was okay, so for a very long time she stayed strong, wanted to prove she was okay, but she was being beaten on a day-to-day basis. And one of the things that she kept on telling me is that she used to do so well at work, despite what was going on at home. It's like she shifted all her energy to the workplace. And of course, she also shared that the moments where she would be beaten. And of course, I've come to realize that abuse does not necessarily operate in isolation, physical abuse rather. So there's also always emotional abuse. There's also always other kind of abuse, psychological, emotional, physical, So, and it never operates in isolation. So looking at my mother's life and everything she went through and the effects of what she went through, of course, at this point, I can't go into details, but she went through things that were so bad, and looking at her and the effects of what she went through, and just her not being able to tell a person or to speak to someone about it. And the people she spoke to about it later, she told them to keep quiet. So, and they did keep quiet because they were looking up to her. So it was hard for them to also come out and tell her story, because she was supposed to be the one to tell her story. So I'm here to share her story. I hope that someone will learn from it. I know it's not an easy place to be. I know many people are struggling with that place. However, it's something that we have. It's a conversation that we need to start having, because a lot is happening, and it's happening, from a lot of families, yet no one wants to come out and speak about it. Okay, but for me, I have to talk about it. Okay, so my mother got married to a man who would beat her, and sometimes she had to run to the neighbors, for safety, sometimes even going to the neighbor's bedroom, for safety. But one thing I've realized about abuse, domestic violence, is that eventually it gets to a place where people get used to those neighbors who fight, and then no one raises an alarm anymore, because sometimes when people want to raise an alarm, it's always the person who's being abused who begs them not to. And this is because your brain has been rewired to accept violence as normal, or to accept abuse as normal. And that is the sad part about all this, is that my mother lived in a place where she had accepted it as abuse. Even after she moved, I remember there were so many times we would meet with my stepfather, and she would still behave in a manner where she wanted him to believe in her, so it was not, she had physically left, but we were still, conversing, and he was still part of our life. And it was hard. It was just a very difficult moment for us, as her children, and even for her, because we would see her, going to drink and doing all these things just to cope. Yeah, so this was a tough conversation to have. However, it's one that is necessary, okay, especially at this point. So the world is moving. Abuse now is no longer happening outside the house. A long time ago, we used to say that you go to school and you meet bullying, you meet abuse out there. But now abuse is happening within the homes, within our homes. A father, abusing the children, the wife abusing the husband, the children, and all that. Even those people who were raised by our grandmothers, like some of us, abuse happens at home right now. So it's important to start having that conversation, right now, because it's one that is very heavy and very not easy. However, it's one that is necessary to have. So apart from being fearful, she was also insecure. She was feeling all these kinds of things. She generally the family used to look up to her, so it was hard for her to say that I'm weak and that I've lost my marriage. And of course, I remember in one of her letters she said that that was the time she was winning at work. So it's possible to be in that state and still win at work, because at that time she was just, going through a lot as an individual. And I remember she would drink a lot because it just made sense to drink at that time. And I don't remember ever having a day where my mother would not drink, unfortunately. And it was just to cope, and so many times she was also emotionally unavailable. It happened to be the time when I had just come to live with them, in Nairobi. And it was a tough time because from my end it looked like she didn't care. From my end it looked like she was just irresponsible. From my end it made sense that she had to, abandon me with my grandmother. But when I continued digging deeper to understand who she truly was, and sat with my dad, sat with the different people who were hanging out with her, just to understand if she ever opened up to them. This is when I actually learned of all these things. And I learned that, in fact, the reason why she chose to walk away is because of the constant, domestic, physical abuse. And it was hard. It was really hard for her. And I remember she shared that in one of her letters that she was always afraid, always having nightmares, always going through moments of deep loneliness. Of course, she would try to connect with people, but because of the, chaos going on in her head, it was impossible to connect with people. And, for a very long time, this is a woman I had been holding so much, against. And, just reading from her and understanding the things that she was going through as an individual. And, of course, that invites compassion, because you just, you have compassion over her, because you now understand what was going on with her. Because sometimes I've realized that it's very easy to assume the worst, to assume the negative, to assume what people are going through. And of course, when they're not meeting our needs, and rather than just understanding where they are. And just that, I think that changed the way I looked at the issues that my mom, I thought my mom had, abandoned me and all that. So it changed the way I looked at all that. And just by understanding her own journey and what she was going through at the time. So of course, she couldn't have been there for me even at the time when I came to live with them, because she was already battling her own, things. And it was hard for her as a mother. One thing I've realized is that when mothers are wounded, it's hard for the house to be healthy. It's hard for the family to be healthy. When mothers or fathers, but today I'm just talking about mothers. When mothers are wounded, there's a lot of emotional abandonment in the home front, and a lot of, an environment where people don't understand, because a woman generally was made to be a nurturer. A woman generally was made to be, the provider of that emotional, support to your children, to the people around you. You can always tell when you walk into a house where a woman is healthy, emotionally healthy, physically healthy, all that. When a woman is healthy and you walk into the house, you will know, you will feel it, you will know. And when a woman is unhealthy and you walk into the house where they live, you will also know. You will understand. You will see the disorganization. You will see the different aspects of how the house is, the home is, and you will just know there's something negative going on. So for many people, my mom moved out eventually from the abuse, and she had to start life afresh. And when she went to hospital, one day she had a headache and she went to hospital. And of course, the doctors were asking her, did you ever hit your head somewhere? Did someone ever hit your head? But Mama kept on saying that she doesn't know, she can't remember. But she knew that she was a victim of domestic violence, but she couldn't say, and it was very sad. Of course, at the time, I thought she was very strong. I thought this is what you need to do with family. You need to stand by each other, even if it's toxic. But unfortunately, because of the blood clot in her brain, we lost her to death in a few years ago. And she was not able to tell, to hold it against the person who had abused her. And I completely understand. Of course, that was my stepfather. And unfortunately, that is what happens in most families. So unfortunately, she died. She went through surgery and she died. And of course, it was still very, it was life-changing, because just looking at your own mother, going through all this and then not being able to mention it, and then she dies, and then you realize the reason why she died. And it's a deep place that you don't even know how to to process. So that is what happened to her. And when I hear people have gone through domestic violence and they can't talk, I completely understand. However, I challenge them to speak up. I challenge them to find someone to speak and to find the strength to move on, because we always have a choice. Yes, he may be the provider. Yes, she may be the provider, because I understand also men go through domestic violence. So for me, I told myself that I'll never stand for any kind of violence, any kind of abuse, you know, whether emotional, whether physical, whether whatever it is, because unfortunately, abuse is one of those toxic things that can, you know, kill a life, can cost a life, because there are those people who are not dead physically, but they are dead the way they're living their life. The way I'm explaining that when you walk into a house where people are, you know, abuse is there, you can notice, you will notice the environment. If you're sensitive, you will notice. Maybe some of us are sensitive because we've gone through it previously. Yeah. And I had shared in my other story about how I was raised and how I had one of my uncles who was, you know, physically violent, and how I went through also my grandmother who was verbally abusive rather. And of course, these are things that I've had to learn firsthand. So my own mother died because she was a victim of domestic violence. So I just want to encourage a woman out there to know that you have a choice. You always have a choice. God gave you a very strong gift of personal will, and with that will, you can make a choice. So I know it's hard. I know it's very, maybe you've gone through, you know, the abuse so much that even you can't find your own worth, but find people who can speak life into you, because it's okay. It's okay that you're where you are, but it's also okay to seek help, because unfortunately for many people who've gone through this moment, it never ends well. Unfortunately, it never ends well. I've seen from my own mother, I've seen from the people around me. There's still other stories that I've not shared of abuse, and it's hard, but it has to be done, because unfortunately, maybe you went through a situation, maybe you picked a mate, a husband or wife, based on when you had not healed, and that is why you picked someone who is bad for you. Sometimes, unfortunately, when we come from that deep, you know, toxic and abusive background, and we go to choose a mate, we always choose what is bad for us. So it's time to heal. It's time to make decisions. My own mother taught me that it's okay to walk away. You know, she walked away when it was too late, but I'm learning to walk away when it's not too late. When I stayed in my own toxic relationship for 2 years, I remember when I was going through counseling, the counselor asked me, Winnie, why did you stay for 2 years? And I realized it's because what is it called? I had gone through abuse previously, so it looked familiar, it sounded familiar, it felt familiar. So that is the reason why I stayed for 2 years. I should have left earlier. So I'm just here to tell a person, walk away earlier. It doesn't matter if you find out after 27 years that you've been, you know, manipulated and abused. Walk away after 27 years. The moment you find out, start with your exit plan. That you've learned something. This was a very, very hard story for me to share, but I hope that someone learns. For me, everything I've gone through, I'm going to share here so that other people can be redeemed, other people can get help. It's okay to acknowledge our weaknesses. It's okay to acknowledge how far we've fallen and how far we've stayed in toxicity. I stayed in toxicity for more than 2 years. For what reason? And then I'm just grateful to God that I was able to leave, you know, before it was too late. So my own mother was not able to leave until it was too late. I was able to leave when it was not too late. So I hope someone has learned something.